A mango picked in Burkina Faso can take two very different economic journeys. On the first journey, it leaves the orchard as fresh fruit. A farmer sells it, a trader moves it, and perhaps it eventually reaches a foreign buyer. That trade matters. It brings income to families and money into the country. But much of the mango's journey as a product ends soon after it leaves the farm. The second journey is longer. The mango enters a processing facility. It is selected, cleaned, and transformed. It can become dried mango, mango puree, or juice. That juice can then be packaged in a Tetra Pak container, given a local brand, stored and prepared for distribution. Instead of exporting only a fruit, Burkina Faso can begin selling more of the work performed after that fruit is harvested. And that raises a much bigger question. What happens when an African country does not simply ask how much it can produce, but how much more of that production it can transform at home? In Bobo Dioulasso, Association Vision d'Afrique offers a small but revealing example. Its processing activity began in 2019 with only 4 workers and reported annual revenue equivalent to roughly a few thousand US dollars. Then came new investment. With support through Burkina Faso's Agriculture Resilience and Competitiveness Project, combined with the company's own contribution and bank financing, Vision d'Afrique acquired equipment that included a mango puree production line and a Tetra Pak juice packaging line. It also received preservation equipment and training intended to strengthen the management of the business. Today, its story includes a locally produced pure mango juice sold under the EVA brand and dozens of permanent and seasonal jobs reported by the project. That does not mean one processing facility has transformed Burkina Faso's mango economy, but it gives us something tangible to follow. A mango can now travel from a Burkinabe orchard into a Burkinabe processing line and emerge as a packaged product carrying more work, more processing, and potentially more economic value before it ever crosses an international border. If you value stories that look beyond headlines to understand how African economies are actually changing, follow the channel because this mango's journey is only beginning. In the case of Vision d'Afrique, the important story is not simply that new machinery arrived. The more revealing question is how that machinery was financed and what it allowed a local business to do. The investment was worth roughly 124,000 US dollars at a representative exchange rate. It was not a free factory handed to the association. The financing combined project support, money contributed by the business itself, and a bank loan. In other words, public development support helped reduce the investment barrier, while the local enterprise also carried part of their financial responsibility. That money was converted into productive capacity. Vision d'Afrique gained a line for turning mangoes into puree and another for packaging mango juice in Tetra Pak containers. Preservation equipment was added, along with training in business management and operational monitoring. That combination matters because a processing machine alone does not create a successful company. Someone must operate it, maintain production standards, manage costs, find customers, organize supplies, and make sure the finished product can be stored and sold. The results reported by the project give us an early picture of that transition. Vision d'Afrique was reported to have 22 permanent jobs and 13 seasonal jobs after the investment. It also developed pure mango juice sold under the EVA brand. These numbers should be kept in perspective. 35 permanent and seasonal positions do not transform a national economy, and project reports should not be mistaken for an independent guarantee that every investment will succeed. But the example reveals something larger. A mango that once might have been sold simply as fresh produce can now enter a local facility and leave as puree or packaged juice. The farmer still matters, the trader still matters, but additional workers, machinery, packaging, management, and branding are now inserted between the orchard and the final customer. That is where the economic meaning of the Tetra Pak becomes clearer. The package itself is not the revolution. It is a visible symbol of something less dramatic but potentially more important. Burkina Faso is building the capacity to perform more steps of the mango's economic journey inside its own borders. And once those extra steps exist, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who captures the value created along that longer journey? Now follow the money inside that longer journey. When a farmer sells a fresh mango, value has already been created. Land was prepared, trees were maintained, fruit was harvested, and someone transported it to a buyer. Fresh mango exports, therefore, remain important. The goal is not to replace them. The opportunity is to add more parts. A mango can be sorted and dried. It can be crushed into puree. It can become juice. That juice can be packaged and branded. Each additional step requires workers, equipment, energy, quality control, transportation, financing, and management. Those activities do not automatically guarantee a profit, but they create more places where economic activity can occur inside Burkina Faso. Dried mango shows that this is more than a theory. Burkina Faso has spent years developing a dried mango industry, including products aimed at demanding European and organic markets. This existing experience matters because it proves that local processors can take a highly perishable fruit, transform it into a product with a longer commercial life, and sell it far beyond the orchard where it was grown. But there is still considerable room to expand processing. Recent industry figures suggest that only a minority of the country's mango production is transformed locally. The exact share varies depending on the year and the source, so it should not be treated as a permanent national figure. The broader point is more important. A large quantity of mango still enters the market without passing through significant industrial processing. That creates both an opportunity and a warning. The opportunity is obvious. More puree, dried fruits, juice, packaging, and branding could allow more stages of production to take place at home. The warning is that processing costs money. A product that sells for a higher price is not automatically more profitable. Machinery must be purchased. Energy must be paid for. Packaging costs money. Workers need wages. Products must meet safety standards, and transportation from a landlocked country can be expensive. So Burkina Faso's challenge is not simply to process everything it grows. It is to identify where local processing can create sustainable value. And that brings the story back to the people at the beginning of the chain. If more factories are built and more mangoes are processed, what does any of this actually mean for the farmer standing in the orchard? For the farmer standing beneath a mango tree, industrial policy matters only if it eventually changes something practical. Is there another buyer for the harvest? Can more food be sold before it spoils? And can the farmer earn a more dependable living? Burkina Faso's mango sector is economically significant. Industry figures used in national reporting have associated the sector with roughly 64,000 direct and indirect jobs, an annual revenue exceeding the equivalent of 35 million US dollars in some reporting periods. Exact totals vary by year and by the way different organizations count production, exports, and employment. But the scale is large enough to affect thousands of families. The problem is that mangoes are perishable. When large quantities ripen within a relatively short season, growers cannot simply store the entire harvest and wait indefinitely for a better price. If traders and processors cannot absorb enough fruit, farmers can face pressure to sell quickly and cheaply. This is where processing capacity can become important. A processor does not need every mango to look like the perfect piece of fresh fruit displayed in a supermarket. Fruit suitable for processing can instead become dried mango, puree, or juice. That creates another possible destination for part of the harvest. Reports from Burkina Faso have already illustrated the opposite effect. When mango drying facilities face shortages of the fuel needed to operate, their ability to purchase and process fruit weakened. For farmers, a problem inside a factory could therefore become a problem back in the orchard. But there is an important caution. Building a processing plant does not guarantee that every farmer will receive a higher price. A factory must remain competitive. It will demand suitable varieties, reliable quantities, consistent quality, and fruit delivered at the right time. Farmers may also need better pest control and production practices to satisfy those requirements. So the strongest argument for local processing is not a promise that every grower immediately becomes wealthier. It is that farmers can gain another market. And in an industry supporting tens of thousands of livelihoods, another reliable buyer can matter enormously. Yet the economic chain does not stop with the farmer. Once that mango crosses the factory gate, an entirely different group of workers begins adding value to it. Once a mango enters a processing plant, the economic story expands beyond the farmer. The fruit begins passing through the hands of people whose jobs may not have existed if it had simply been sold fresh. Someone receives and sorts the harvest. Someone prepares the fruit for processing. Others operate equipment, monitor production, package the finished product, manage storage, handle transportation, maintain records, and prepare orders for customers. Vision d'Afrique provides a modest but useful example. After receiving new processing capacity, the project reported 22 permanent jobs and 13 seasonal positions. That is 35 opportunities connected to one relatively small operation. Elsewhere in Burkina Faso, the employment effect can become much larger during mango season. Association Vive Laboriculture in Orodara, another enterprise supported through the Agricultural Competitiveness Project, reported 10 permanent positions and roughly 350 seasonal jobs. Other drying operations have reported employing hundreds of seasonal workers when production is active. Women are especially important in this part of the value chain. In some mango processing businesses, they make up a large majority of the workforce. That means local processing can connect agricultural industrialization not only to exports, but also to income earned by women and households in producing communities. Still, these numbers require perspective. Seasonal work is not the same as a permanent industrial job. Employment that lasts only during mango season cannot provide the same security as year-round work. And a factory that cannot obtain enough fruit, energy, or customers cannot protect jobs simply because machines have been installed. That is why the deeper objective should be to build an ecosystem rather than celebrate individual factories. If puree producers, drying facilities, juice companies, packaging operations, transport businesses, laboratories, and exporters can grow together, then one agricultural product can support many different kinds of economic activity. This is where value added becomes something ordinary people can actually see. It is the driver moving fruit from an orchard. It is the woman preparing mangoes for drying. It is the technician operating a processing line. It is the worker packing finished products for shipment. But every one of those jobs depends on something that receives far less attention than a new factory. The machines must keep running. And in Burkina Faso's mango industry, energy has become one of the clearest warnings that industrial ambition can quickly collide with economic reality. A factory can have modern machines, trained workers, and plenty of mangoes waiting outside. But if it cannot secure affordable energy, production can stop. That problem has become painfully real for Burkina Faso's mango processors. Much of the country's industrial mango processing remains concentrated in drying. Many traditional dryers have depended heavily on butane gas. Yet subsidized household gas was designed for families, not industrial production. That creates a difficult policy conflict. Processors need affordable fuel to keep their equipment running, while the government cannot reasonably subsidize industrial energy forever through a program intended for household consumption. The consequences can reach far beyond the factory. One processor reported losing nearly 440,000 pounds of fresh mangoes during the 2025 season because sufficient gas was not available for processing. For a highly perishable crop, losing energy for several days can mean losing fruit that farmers spent months producing. This reveals an uncomfortable truth about industrialization. Machines do not run on political ambition. They require electricity, heat, maintenance, spare parts, financing, and workers who know how to operate them. A new processing line may look impressive during an inauguration, but its real value is measured during an ordinary working day when the factory must operate reliably and profitably. The answer is not necessarily permanent energy subsidies. Keeping industrial fuel artificially cheap forever could place a growing burden on public finances and reduce incentives to invest in more efficient technology. But removing support before businesses have realistic alternatives can also damage production and employment. A more durable transition would give processors time and financing to replace older equipment, improve energy efficiency, and adopt technology suited to industrial production. Electric systems, steam-based equipment, and other alternatives are already part of the discussion, but conversion requires money and technical adaptation. This is why Burkina Faso's mango story is about much more than agriculture. The country can grow the fruit. It can build factories. It can train workers. But successful industrialization requires all of those pieces to function together. And even when the machines are running, another challenge begins. Burkina Faso has no seaport. To reach a customer overseas, a packaged mango product must still travel hundreds of miles across borders through transportation networks, and eventually into some of the world's most demanding markets. For Burkina Faso, producing a packaged mango product is only half the journey. The country is landlocked. There is no domestic seaport where a container can simply be loaded onto a ship bound for Europe or another distant market. A product leaving Bobo Dioulasso must first travel by road, cross borders, reach a port in another country, and then continue by sea. Every additional stage adds time, handling, paperwork, cost, and risk. That is why roads, warehouses, collection centers, and reliable transport belong in the same conversation as factories. Burkina Faso's Agriculture Resilience and Competitiveness Project recognized this connection. Its broader program included rural roads and storage infrastructure intended to improve the movement of agricultural products from producing areas toward markets. The lesson is straightforward. A modern processing line loses part of its advantage if trucks struggle to move raw materials into the factory or finished products out of it. But transportation is only one gate. Quality is another. Burkina Faso has already confronted problems involving fruit flies, aging orchards, and phytosanitary requirements. The country's mango campaigns have emphasized better inspection, surveillance of fruit flies, improved production practices, and stronger organization among exporters. For an international customer, patriotic slogans cannot replace these requirements. If a shipment fails food safety or plant health standards, national pride will not make it acceptable. If puree does not meet the buyer's specifications, a new factory cannot force the buyer to purchase it. That is why certification becomes strategically important for companies such as Vision d'Afrique. The goal is not simply to produce puree or fill a Tetra Pak container. The product must demonstrate that it can satisfy the standards required by the market it hopes to enter. This creates a different definition of economic sovereignty. Sovereignty is not asking foreign markets to lower their standards for Burkina Faso. It is developing enough local knowledge, laboratories, inspection capacity, production discipline, and certification expertise for Burkinabe products to pass those standards on their own merits. The mango has now traveled from orchard to factory through energy problems, logistics, and international quality requirements. At this point, a larger political question enters the story. Where does President Captain Ibrahim Traore fit into this transformation, and how much of it can actually be attributed to his government? President Captain Ibrahim Traore enters this story at an important point, but accuracy matters. He did not create Vision d'Afrique, and he did not invent Burkina Faso's mango processing industry. The Agricultural Competitiveness Project supporting Vision d'Afrique existed before Traore came to power. Burkina Faso was also producing dried mango and exporting agricultural products long before his government. Giving one leader credit for the entire transformation would distort the history. What has changed under Traore is the political emphasis placed on processing more of Burkina Faso's raw materials at home. Since 2023, Traore has repeatedly argued that the country should not be satisfied with producing raw materials while much of the transformation takes place elsewhere. His broader message has been that what Burkina Faso produces should increasingly be processed in Burkina Faso, consumed locally where possible, and exported as higher value products when competitive. Mangoes fit naturally into that vision, but they are only one part of it. Under his leadership, the same argument has appeared around tomatoes, corn, cashews, oilseeds, and other agricultural products. New processing projects have become highly visible symbols of an effort to connect farming with industrial production. For Traore, this approach is also connected to economic sovereignty. The idea is straightforward. If Burkina Faso can perform more processing itself, then more skills, jobs, industrial knowledge, and business activity have the opportunity to remain inside the national economy. Yet even Traore has acknowledged that Burkina Faso's industrialization remains at an early stage. That admission matters. A government can encourage factories, mobilize investment, and make local processing a national priority. But political commitment cannot eliminate the energy shortages, financing constraints, transportation costs, certification requirements, and competitive pressures we have already seen. Traore's role should therefore be understood as that of a leader trying to accelerate and politically elevate an existing movement toward domestic processing, not as the man who created the mango industry from nothing. And that distinction leads to an even more complicated question. As Burkina Faso speaks more openly about sovereignty and reducing dependence, how has the West responded? Has it actually opposed this industrial ambition, or is the reality far more complicated than the popular narrative suggests? The popular version of this story is tempting. Burkina Faso wants to process its own resources. Ibrahim Traore demands economic sovereignty, and the West tries to stop it. The evidence tells a more complicated story. There is no credible evidence that Western governments oppose Burkina Faso simply because it wants to transform mangoes into puree, dried fruit, or packaged juice. In fact, the World Bank helped finance the Agriculture Resilience and Competitiveness Project that supported Vision d'Afrique. International financing therefore helped build some of the very local processing capacity associated with this push for greater economic independence. But Western institutions have raised other concerns about Burkina Faso's economic direction. The International Monetary Fund has warned about weakening credit to the private sector, growing exposure of banks to the public sector, and the risks of poorly targeted energy subsidies. These concerns deserve serious attention. If private companies cannot obtain affordable financing, entrepreneurs may struggle to purchase machinery, expand factories, or survive difficult seasons. There are also Western criticisms of Traore's government involving governance, civil liberties, security, and relations with France and European institutions. Those disputes are real, but they should not be presented as evidence that the West wants Burkina Faso to remain an exporter of raw mangoes. At the same time, Western advice should not be treated as automatically correct simply because it comes from an international institution. Burkina Faso has a legitimate economic question to answer. How can a country rich in agricultural production capture more of the processing, employment, knowledge, and commercial value generated after harvest? The strongest strategy may therefore be neither isolation nor dependence. Foreign capital can finance Burkinabe machinery. Imported technology can help train Burkinabe workers. International markets can buy Burkinabe products. But the long-term test is whether those relationships leave behind stronger local businesses, greater technical knowledge, and productive capacity that Burkina Faso can sustain. Economic sovereignty does not require closing the door to the world. It requires becoming more capable when that door is opened. And that may be the most important lesson in this entire mango story, not only for Burkina Faso, but for Mali, Niger, and many other African countries asking how they can move from exporting what they grow to creating more value from it at home. The mango that began this story in a Burkinabe orchard has now traveled much farther than a piece of fruit normally would. Along the way, it revealed farmers looking for reliable buyers, women working in processing facilities, entrepreneurs investing in machinery, banks providing capital, factories struggling with energy, and exporters confronting transportation and international standards. That is why the lesson extends beyond mangoes. For African countries, the first question should not only be how much cocoa, cotton, cashews, coffee, mangoes, or minerals they produce. They should also ask how many stages after production can realistically be performed at home. But factories alone are not enough. A country needs reliable raw materials, affordable energy, skilled workers, financing, roads, storage, quality control, certification, customers, and competitive businesses. Success should therefore be measured not by the number of ribbon-cutting ceremonies, but by how many factories remain productive years later, how much local produce they purchase, how many jobs survive, and whether their products can compete without permanent subsidies. There is another lesson. Sovereignty does not have to mean isolation. African countries can use foreign investment, imported technology, and international markets while still building more productive capacity at home. The real question is what remains after the partnership. Skills, machinery, profitable businesses, infrastructure, and stronger local supply chains, or another cycle of dependence. That debate reaches far beyond Burkina Faso. It belongs in African news and discussions within the African Union. It matters as Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traore, Mali under Assimi Goïta, and Niger under Abdourahmane Chiani search for new economic paths across West Africa and the Sahel, even as their relationships with France and other traditional partners continue to change. The journey is far from complete. But perhaps the most important question for Africa is changing. Not simply, what can Africa sell to the world? But how much more of what Africa produces can Africans transform, package, brand, and profitably sell themselves? If you believe that question deserves closer attention, share your perspective in the comments and follow the channel. The future of African economic sovereignty will be determined not by slogans, but by what countries can actually build, operate, improve, and sustain. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. Every video on this channel is carefully researched, thoughtfully written, and meticulously edited by our dedicated team. We don't rely on automated production or shortcuts to create our content. Every story, every visual, and every detail is crafted with genuine care, passion, and a commitment to bringing you meaningful, high-quality videos.